Right before a woman steps into the moment of receiving the most sacred blessing of her life, it rarely looks the way people imagine. There are no fireworks, no cheering crowds, no sudden burst of lucky signs. Instead, there is a long stretch of stillness, a silence so deep she can hear her own heartbeat. Sometimes it comes with a profound loneliness, a sense that everything is slipping out of her grasp, work feels stagnant, relationships grow distant, familiar joys suddenly lose their spark. It may look as though everything around her is falling apart, but in truth, it's the moment when old walls are being dismantled to lay a new foundation. It's a season of cleansing, the quiet hand of destiny, removing every fragment that no longer serves the path ahead. In this time, she is taught an important truth. Before she can hold more, she must learn to need less. A great blessing is never placed in hands still clinging to what is outdated. To receive, the hands must be empty, the heart wide open, and the mind steady enough not to tremble under the weight of the new. This stillness and loss are not punishments, they are realignment. When everything slows down and the noise fades, she is pulled out of her old orbit, forced to face herself without distraction. The truth is, no transformation happens in chaos. Every great structure is built in the quiet work of its foundation, and the soul is no different. The emptiness, uncomfortable as it feels, is fertile ground for new seeds. She may think she's being left behind, but in reality, she's being moved out of a place she no longer belongs. She might lose relationships that once sat at the center of her world, only to have them replaced with truer connections. She might feel lost, but that's because the old map has expired and a new one is being drawn. The challenge is, in the middle of this upheaval, it's hard to believe this is preparation because everything on the surface says otherwise. But if she can stay calm enough to look deeper, she will see that these losses aren't meaningless. They are breathing space for her to reorder her inner world, to discern what is essential and what is only an illusion. Not everyone has the patience to walk through this quiet season. Many rush to fill it with activity, promises, or fleeting relationships just to avoid the discomfort of emptiness. But if she dares to slow down, to embrace the silence as part of the journey, she will witness something extraordinary. What truly belongs to her will come, and this time it will come to stay. Blessings don't arrive when we cling out of fear of losing. They come when we are strong enough to release, to trust that anything leaving is making space for something better. That's when she no longer measures her worth by what she holds, but by her ability to stand tall even with empty hands. In that moment, emptiness is no longer frightening, it becomes a promise. And in that promise, a new chapter is taking shape quietly, steadily, and more beautiful than anything she has ever imagined. Restlessness is always the first sign of a profound transformation. It doesn't arrive to destroy, it comes to awaken the parts of the soul that have been dormant for far too long. One morning, she wakes up and realizes that the things once familiar suddenly feel foreign. The job is the same, the relationships still exist, yet the sense of connection has faded. Old joys no longer stir her heart the way they once did. An unnamed unease rises within her as if something is about to happen, but she can't yet give it a name. This feeling frightens many because it's like standing in a room where everything has been rearranged. What once belonged in its place is now scattered, and she isn't even sure what she's looking for. Yet, this very disarray is the opening step toward a new order. Restlessness is the knock of truth, forcing her to re-examine everything she's built to see what truly belongs to her and what is merely habit or illusion. When a great blessing is about to arrive, the soul goes through this tremor as a way of expanding its capacity to hold more. Just as a vessel must be rinsed clean before it can receive fresh water, the soul must release what is old. Restlessness, then, is not the enemy. It is an invitation. Look within. Have the courage to remove what no longer serves the road ahead. Many women mistake restlessness for failure. They believe they're doing something wrong or losing control. But in reality, this is the moment she begins stepping outside her comfort zone. And the comfort zone, despite its name, is often the longest standing prison for the dreams she's buried. During this time, she may feel disconnected from those she was once closest to. Conversations become shallow. Activities she used to love turn into obligations. Even within her own home, she feels strangely out of place. This is because her inner world has started to shift its frequency, while the world around her still moves to the old rhythm. If she tries to cling to that old rhythm, she'll feel drained and stuck. But if she chooses to slow down, to truly sit with the discomfort, she'll start hearing what the noise once drowned out. She'll notice beliefs that have limited her, habits that seemed harmless but have been depleting her energy, relationships that exist only out of fear of change rather than genuine growth. Like the labor pains before birth, restlessness is a signal that something new is being formed. How long it lasts depends on how willing she is to face it. The more she resists, the slower and heavier the process feels. The more she opens, the sooner clarity arrives. Neuroscience shows that when humans confront restlessness, the brain activates regions designed to process and adapt to pressure. This is not only a defense mechanism, but also an opportunity to rewire thought patterns. Each time she chooses to stay with discomfort instead of running from it, she is training her nervous system to stand steady in uncertainty. And in that very uncertainty, true strength is forged. Maya is one such example, successful, admired, yet she always carried an emptiness inside. She tried to fill it with new achievements, new recognition, but the void remained. One day, Maya stopped. Instead of running, she sat still with the emptiness, allowing herself to feel it without judgment. In the quiet, she realized she had been living for the gaze of others for far too long. In that moment, she knew she had to change. She let go of artificial standards and began seeking joy in things that required no proof. Gradually, the restlessness faded, making room for clarity and peace. Restlessness doesn't come to break you, it comes to expand you. It is the necessary pressure that stretches the soul, preparing it to hold more. Once she understands this, she will no longer fear the days she feels lost. She will know they are simply the signal that a new door is opening, and behind that door, the blessing is already waiting. Detachment is not always a decisive, dramatic act. Sometimes it begins as a subtle feeling when the things that once defined you start to feel tight, no longer a perfect fit. One day, she realizes the dress she once wore with pride now feels suffocating. Not because the dress has changed, but because she has outgrown it. Titles, roles, habits, and relationships that were once milestones now feel like keepsakes valuable in the past, but no longer meant to be carried into the future. Detachment can feel like loss, because it often means letting go of things once deeply intertwined with her identity, a stable job, a long-term relationship, a familiar way of living. From the outside, people may think she's losing everything, but in truth, she's making space for what's next. Like a tree shedding its leaves in autumn, not because life is ending, but because it's preparing for a greener season ahead. Many women mistake detachment for indifference, but detachment is not about loving less, it's about loving without chains. It's when she no longer seeks her worth in someone else's eyes, no longer needs labels to define who she is. This freedom doesn't come from losing everything, but from realizing she never truly owned them in the first place. Grace is one example. She spent years climbing the career ladder, respected and admired by her peers. Yet over time, her passion faded. She found herself working only to maintain the image of the successful woman, not for joy or meaning. At first, Grace resisted, convincing herself it was just temporary fatigue. But when the emptiness persisted, she knew she had to let go. She left her job not out of failure, but out of honesty with herself. In doing so, she discovered a new path, one where work not only provided income, but also nourished her soul. Eleanor's story is similar. She believed her worth came from taking care of everyone, her husband, her children, her colleagues. She gave until she was depleted, rarely asking herself what she needed. One evening, looking in the mirror and barely recognizing the woman staring back, she began to change. Eleanor didn't leave her family, but she did let go of the belief that her love was only valuable if it cost her well-being. She revived old hobbies, reclaimed forgotten passions, and slowly returned to her vibrant self. Detachment isn't always easy. It touches the deepest fears: fear of being left behind, fear of losing value, fear of falling into emptiness. But that emptiness is the doorway for the new to enter. When she releases one thing, she also opens her hands to receive another. Scientifically, detachment is a process of rewiring the brain. Every role, relationship, and habit creates familiar neural loops. Letting go triggers the brain's resistance because it disrupts that false sense of safety. But beyond this discomfort, new connections begin to form, ones that prioritize presence, authenticity, and true value. Zakra experienced this after leaving a long-term relationship. It wasn't a bad relationship, but it no longer aligned with who she was becoming. She had feared being alone, afraid the emptiness would swallow her whole. But when she chose to stay with that emptiness, she began to feel lighter. She learned to love herself without needing someone else as proof. And when she was ready, new relationships, deep and healthy, naturally found their way to her. Detachment doesn't make her cold, it makes her clear. She knows which connections nourish and which drain. She knows which dreams are truly hers and which are just the expectations of others. And living with this clarity, she becomes free in a way nothing can bind. That is the essence of detachment, not abandoning everything, but releasing what no longer fits to make room for what's truly worthy. And when the new arrives, she will realize she never really lost anything. She simply traded it for something better. Silence and intentional solitude are not retreats born of failure, but conscious choices. They are not the same as closed off isolation. They are sacred spaces where a woman returns to herself, stepping away from the noise and the old rhythms that no longer resonate. In a world that constantly urges connection, choosing to step into stillness is an act of courage because it demands facing oneself with no layers to hide behind. At first, this stillness can feel uncomfortable. It exposes unresolved thoughts, suppressed emotions, and long ignored questions. Yet this exposure is a gift. Without the rush of busy schedules or the distraction of hollow conversations, she begins to hear the voice within the one that had been drowned out by the noise of others. Amara is a living example. After a painful breakup, she chose to spend a year in deliberate solitude. She didn't shut herself off completely, but she stripped away all unnecessary social interactions. Instead, she walked by the lake, meditated each morning, and wrote in her journal every night. At first, the quiet made her restless. No more constant phone notifications, no more evenings filled with chatter and laughter. But over time, she realized she wasn't disappearing as she had feared. She was becoming fully present for the first time in years. Stillness is an ideal environment for rebalancing the nervous system. Biologically, when life slows down, the body shifts into a restorative state, reducing stress hormones and enhancing focus. In this state, she can better distinguish between the impulsive reactions of fear and the steady responses of intuition. That is the foundation for making wiser choices about the future. Intentional solitude also refines relationships. Without the pressure to fill her calendar with meetups, she starts to see who truly brings peace and who only adds noise. This isn't cold-hearted elimination, it's a natural filtration. Genuine connections endure, while forced ones quietly fade away. In Eastern traditions, time spent alone is often viewed as a rite of passage. Monks and meditation masters seek silence not because they despise the world, but because they wish to return to it with a mind that is clearer and a heart that is more open. A woman who steps into stillness does the same. She is not running from life, but preparing to live it more meaningfully. This solitude is entirely different from empty loneliness. It is not born of abandonment, but of discernment. It's not that no one wants to be with her, it's that she chooses carefully who earns a place there. After this stage, she becomes less drawn to half-hearted relationships because she now understands the value of her space and her peace. Ironically, it is this very stillness that makes her magnetic. Others may not know why, but they can sense the grounded whole presence she carries. She does not strive to impress, yet leaves a lasting mark simply by being herself. It is a quiet, enduring kind of allure, one that only comes when someone is truly at home in their own being. Silence and intentional solitude are the fertile soil where new seeds are planted. Here, there is no pressure to bloom instantly. She can watch, tend, and let things grow at their own natural pace. And when the season arrives, she will step forward with clarity, steadiness, and a renewed energy ready to receive what is truly worthy. A deep connection with the body is a sign that a woman is entering a new stage of maturity, one where she no longer sees her body merely as something to adjust or display, but as a sacred temple holding the wisdom and truth of her soul. She begins to listen to the subtle signals, the depth or shallowness of her breath, the rush or slowness of her steps, the tension in her shoulders, the softness in her belly. Every reaction, every sensation becomes a message no longer ignored as before. The body holds more memory than she realizes. Unspoken grief may live in rigid shoulders. Words left unsaid might hide in a clenched jaw. Lingering anxiety can turn into short, shallow breaths. When she returns to her body, she is not only caring for it through food and movement, she is also releasing stories that were never told. This journey often begins in small ways. One morning, she chooses to take a deep breath instead of reaching for her phone. At dinner, she slows down, tasting each flavor instead of eating while scrolling through the news. One afternoon, she walks slowly, feeling the ground beneath her feet. These seemingly simple changes open the door to a new world, where she starts trusting her body's natural rhythm. Leora is one example. After years of fatigue and self-doubt, she realized she had been treating her body like a machine to endure rather than a companion to honor. She began each day with 5 minutes of conscious breathing, added forest walks to her routine, and stopped rushing her meals. Instead of forcing herself into external beauty standards, she listened to what her body needed to feel safe and energized. The result was not just a change in her physique, but in the way she made choices. She said no when she needed to, left relationships that drained her, and invested her time in what truly nourished her. Scientifically, connecting with the body activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the state of restoration and healing. Slow, deep breathing and gentle movements such as yoga or walking meditation directly stimulate the vagus nerve, lowering heart rate, reducing stress, and creating a sense of safety. When the body feels safe, the mind gains clarity and intuition becomes sharper. This connection also offers a natural compass in relationships and decisions. She notices the difference between a conversation that makes her body expand and lighten versus one that makes her contract and feel heavy. She senses sincerity or falseness not just through words, but through how another person's energy affects her. This kind of perception cannot be learned from theory. It comes only from being fully present in her own body. Once deeply connected to her body, she stops seeking external validation to know she is worthy. She no longer needs someone to pursue her to feel attractive, nor does she chase anyone to prove her value. She enters a room with quiet confidence because she knows she is aligned in mind, emotion, and body. This process doesn't make her avoid fear or discomfort. It helps her stay with them without being consumed. When anxious, she breathes and observes. When angry, she feels the heat spread before it cools. When joyful, she allows herself to savor it without rushing to hold on. This is soft power, not control, but harmony. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where cracks in pottery are mended with gold, connecting with the body is about embracing the marks of the past and making them part of present beauty. She doesn't need to erase scars or limitations. She learns to live in harmony with them. And in this acceptance, she becomes more whole, more magnetic, and more powerful than any perfect facade could make her. When a woman lives fully in her body, she becomes a field of energy others can sense before she even speaks. She doesn't need to prove or perform, she simply needs to be. And that presence alone is the most powerful affirmation of her worth. Peace in solitude is a rare kind of strength, one few talk about, but anyone who touches it is changed forever. It is not the emptiness of loneliness, nor a sign of loss, but a state of willingly choosing to be with oneself and feeling complete. In a world that constantly urges us to seek validation from others, finding peace when you are alone is a quiet revolution. When a woman learns to be alone without feeling empty, she begins to understand the difference between presence and filling space. Not every presence brings connection, and not every gap needs to be filled. She sees how many relationships are kept out of fear of silence, how many conversations happen only to avoid hearing one's own inner voice. Once she no longer fears stillness, she begins to sift through her connections, keeping those that nourish, releasing those that stir restlessness. Alina experienced this shift. She had spent years in a good enough relationship, no dramatic fights, no chaos, but also no true understanding or resonance. Over time, she lost herself. Every dinner was filled with shallow exchanges. Each day felt more like fulfilling obligations than truly showing up. One evening, after clearing the table and standing by the balcony, she felt a wave of peace wash over her in her own company. No one expected her to pretend she was fine. No one asked her to shrink to fit their expectations. In that moment, she realized this peace was worth more than any counterfeit version of together. Psychologically, the ability to feel safe when alone is a sign of secure attachment to oneself. Instead of relying on others to regulate her emotions, she creates her own sense of stability. Instead of seeking outside approval, she grants herself her own validation. This becomes the foundation for all relationships. She enters them from a place of wholeness, not from a void that needs to be filled. Peace in solitude also changes how she sees the world. She no longer accepts half-hearted connections just to avoid being alone. She understands that being with the wrong person is lonelier than being by herself. And when she no longer fears losing someone, she can finally choose the one truly worth having by her side. This state doesn't arrive overnight. At first, the quiet may make her restless. She might miss the pings of her phone, the familiar noise that once filled the space. But if she stays patient, she will realize she's learning a life skill. Being alone without feeling lacking, that is true freedom. Peace in solitude doesn't close her off to love or relationships. On the contrary, it allows her to enter them without fear. She doesn't need to control, rush, or sacrifice her peace for someone's presence. She knows how to say no to what doesn't align and yes to what truly resonates. Once she reaches this state, she becomes different not because she's distant, but because she's clear. Others can sense the steadiness in her energy. They see someone unmoved by silence, unshaken when plans fall through, unhurried to fill the gap with just anything. And that steadiness draws people in not loudly, but with a quiet, enduring pull. Peace in solitude is the foundation for great blessings. Only when she feels whole without anyone else can she welcome relationships or opportunities, not out of fear, but from true alignment. And when those blessings come, they will not pull her away from herself. They will walk alongside her on the path she has consciously chosen. Refining relationships and life standards is a quiet yet powerful transformation. It happens when a woman realizes her peace is non-negotiable. She understands more than ever that not everyone deserves to stay, and not every bond is worth keeping simply because it has existed for a long time. When her top priority becomes inner calm, she must face the truth. Some connections survive only out of habit, obligation, or fear of loss, rather than truly nourishing her growth. This refinement is never impulsive. It's not cutting ties in anger, but a process of observing, sensing, and choosing. She begins to notice the difference between a conversation that expands her soul and one that makes her body contract, between a person who leaves her feeling light and one who drains her after just a few words. She pays closer attention to how she feels after seeing someone calm or chaotic, energized or depleted. The same refinement applies to her life standards. What once felt enough no longer satisfies her. She no longer chooses a job just because it's stable if it costs her mental health. She no longer agrees to a relationship simply because he's a good person, if the connection isn't truly deep. She no longer joins social events out of fear of missing out if they leave her mind exhausted. This takes courage, because refinement often means saying no more often, and this no doesn't come from rejection, but from self-respect. Every time she says no to what doesn't align, she's saying yes to something better. The space left after each refusal is not a loss, it's room for the right, new things to enter. Sometimes, refining relationships makes her appear cold or overly selective. But she knows selection is not about building walls, it's about opening the right doors. She's willing to spend time alone rather than rush into half-hearted connections. She no longer accepts invitations just to avoid being left out, choosing instead to be where her mind feels most at peace. A subtle shift happens when she practices refinement long enough. High-quality relationships start to find her. When her energy becomes clear, she attracts people on the same wavelength, those who respect her boundaries, share her values, and know how to be present without infringing on each other's freedom. Raising her life standards brings a similar effect. When she refuses to settle for less than she deserves, the universe seems to respond with opportunities that match her new level. From her work and home to her overall environment, everything begins to rearrange itself to reflect her standards. But refinement is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing process because life changes and so does she. What fits today may not fit tomorrow, and that's natural. She learns to listen to herself regularly, adjusting instead of clinging to an old structure just because she once loved it. This is the art of living consciously, knowing when to hold on and when to let go, when to step forward and when to step back. The more she refines, the more she realizes she needs less to be happy, just sincere relationships, meaningful experiences, and an environment that allows her to live in alignment with her true self. Refining relationships and life standards is not a journey toward perfection, but toward authenticity. And when she lives authentically, everything else falls into place. What remains after this process will be what nourishes, supports, and walks with her on the path toward her greatest blessings. Preparing to receive the sacred is not a single moment, it is an entire journey. Every stage from restlessness, detachment, stillness, and reconnection with the body to finding peace in solitude, refining relationships, and raising life standards is part of the clearing process. No step is wasted, and no step happens by accident. Every experience, whether gentle or jagged, is part of the purification, and reshaping that allows a woman to stand in the fullness of who she is. Looking back, she will see seasons where it seemed like she had lost everything direction, once close relationships, even the familiar sense of herself. But in those very losses, she learned to stand without collapsing, to trust the emptiness instead of fearing it. That emptiness was never the end, but a pause, an interval that allowed her life's rhythm to align with something new, greater, and deeper. Preparation doesn't mean trying to control every change. On the contrary, it demands a release, not resignation, but letting go of what cannot be held. It demands trust, not in a life that will always be easy, but in a life that will always lead her where she needs to go. Above all, it demands honesty with herself, the courage to face the truth, even if it means changing an entire way of living. A woman who has walked through these stages enters her future differently. She no longer bows to fit someone else's expectations, nor stands on tiptoe to impress. She walks steadily, carrying clarity about her worth, unwilling to trade her peace for anything. She doesn't seek relationships to fill a void, but to resonate and grow together. She doesn't choose work only for its safety, but for how it nourishes both her soul and her purpose. When she is truly ready, she becomes the one who no longer chases the sacred comes to her. What she radiates inner stillness, wholeness, clarity is the most powerful invitation. The right opportunities, people, and experiences naturally align with her life, as if they had been waiting there all along. The sacred may not always arrive in the form she imagined. It could be a deep love, a life-changing opportunity, a lasting peace after years of chaos, or simply the feeling of living in complete alignment with herself. But when it arrives, she will know not because it is dazzling, but because it fits perfectly with her heartbeat and her values. This journey also teaches her that preparation never truly ends. Life is always in motion, and each new chapter requires its own refinement. The difference now is that she no longer fears seasons of uncertainty. She understands that each tremor is just a reminder that a new level is on its way. Instead of panicking, she meets it with curiosity and readiness. Receiving the sacred is not a reward for perfection, but the result of honesty, patience, and repeated right choices. Every time she chooses to stay with discomfort instead of running, every time she releases the old to make room for the new, every time she upholds her boundaries instead of compromising, she lays another stone in the foundation of her future. And then, One day, when the door opens, she will step through without needing any more preparation. Not because she has all the answers, but because she has become the woman who can receive anything worthy of her. That is the moment she understands the sacred was never a destination, but the way she learned to walk